Okay, so welcome to the webinar this morning. Thanks for attending, everybody. My name is Nathan Fulham. I'm the content manager here at Codec, and I'm just going to be introducing you to this webinar before our expert Leonardo starts taking you through the actual main content itself. So to begin with, I'm just going to talk about our agenda, and our agenda is going to be based around an introduction to Codec and your presenter, Leonardo. Then we're going to talk about your data and the upcoming GDPR. Then the other topics will be centered around data protection, data access, mobile security, data breaches, and what next steps you can take to ensure your IT infrastructure is fully protected. Okay, so a little bit about Codec. So obviously we're going to be talking to you for the next half hour, but mainly security issues. But let's just have a quick chat about why you should be listening to us. We were established in 1985. We have offices across Europe. We now have over 200 staff, and we've worked with a broad range of clients across many different sectors, as you can see there in this graphic. We've worked on all kinds of different cool IT projects, so we have a lot of experience and a lot of expertise. In what areas do we work? Well, we do it all. We do CRM, ERP, analytics, IT, security, which is of course is relevant to this presentation, cloud, DevOps, SharePoint, etc. And we are the only partner in Ireland that offers expertise across the full stack of Microsoft solutions. So that's kind of our USP. There's some of the awards we've won. We're proud to have won lots of these because we think we've done a good job with our customers. They're happy with the work we've done. We're the current Microsoft Country Partner of the Year in Ireland. Your presenter, who's about to start speaking to you on the topics in this presentation, is Leonardo, our Senior Cloud and Platform Consultant. He has helped companies increase their productivity using Office 365 and Azure Cloud solutions, and he has 15 years experience in helping various companies with their requirements. Now, before we dive in, just a few stats that might be of interest to you about why this topic is important. Now, it's worth saying also that these stats are all relatively recent and also are relevant to the Irish market. The first one there on the top left, 1/3 of data protection professionals have experienced a data breach in the past 12 months. Now, in the media, we hear about independent news and media data breaches. We hear about also things like Cambridge Analytica with the scandal there affecting Facebook data. There's even an app I use called MyFitnessPal that was affected by a data breach. It seems to be an ongoing and almost daily occurrence. But all we hear about are big companies. We don't hear about the small companies that are affected. So it's a huge issue, and it's something that every company really needs to pay attention to. Another statistic there, 75% of data breaches caused by external people. But the interesting ones are, it takes 191 days for organizations to even identify a data breach, and a further 66 to contain it. So you can see the cost there for yourselves of not being prepared for this kind of thing. And the final stats we want to draw your attention to are the fact that the cost of fraud to organizations in Ireland has increased from 500,000 to 1.7 million. And far from going away, this problem is only getting worse. The number of attacks has almost doubled since 2012. These are statistics from Grant Thornton. And most worryingly of all, over half of firms in Ireland have no strategy, no plan in place to deal with these issues. So that's hopefully where we're going to help you a little bit. The final thing I want to say is, and you all know this because you're receiving emails, you're attending seminars and webinars about it all the time, GDPR is coming in a couple of weeks. But the important thing to note is that the onus is on you and the people at your company to ensure your business is compliant. Nobody's going to do it for you. And while we're all aware of these headline penalties that you can be penalized up to 20 million or 4% of your annual turnover, we've all heard about those. Probably something that is not reported as much is the fact that you must report a data breach in your organization within 3 days. Now, bear in mind that we just looked at statistics that said it takes companies 191 days to even detect a data breach. So you can see there's a bit of a disconnect there between what is happening and what should be happening. So I'm going to dive in now with Leonardo and just pass the control over to him. But obviously, it's in a very important area, and hopefully some of the information we're about to share with you will help you to look after some of these issues. So I'll pass you over to Leonardo now.
Thank you, Nathan. Welcome, everyone. Uh, back in the day, on simpler times, the boundaries of our environments were much easier to be defined. We would usually have a firewall sitting on the edge of the environment, separating your LAN from the WAN. Uh, on those days, mobile devices were barely able to make phone calls. So sharing data externally was pretty much inexistent other than using email. Uh, Nowadays, things have changed considerably. We now have mobile devices with the processing power of computers and servers sometimes, and affordable mobile data plans uh, enable everyone to have their corporate data on their mobile devices anywhere at any time. So the boundaries are now more difficult to be defined. Some say that identity is the new boundary because once you are with your identity, you are able to have access to all of your data. But I think we can go one step further and say that data itself is the boundaries, in a sense that an email message or a Word document that contains sensitive data needs to be protected. And Microsoft 365 help us reaching that further step. Microsoft has defined GDPR relation based on four pillars. Discover, uh, you need to find if you have sensitive data in your Office 365 environment, such as PPS numbers or credit card numbers, and you can search for that content on Office 365 through some solutions deployed by Microsoft, such as content search. After you discover that data, you need to manage it. You can either retain it, hold it, or you can purge it depending on which regulations you are abiding to. And Office 365 has tools for that as well. We can hold data based on specific criteria that was used to search for it. So let's say you need to keep your employees' PPS numbers for X amount of time. You can do that with retention or deletion policies. If you need to hold to that data, you need to be able to protect it so it doesn't get leaked. And Microsoft 365 has tools for that as well. We can use Azure Information Protection and other tools to protect that data. And in case you need to report any breaches or leaks that happen, we can do that through audit logs and reports that have a considerable amount of detail on them. On Azure Information Protection now, Azure Information Protection is a solution based on two other Office 365 technologies that have been around for quite some time. Office 365 Data Loss Prevention, which allows us to scan documents for specific criteria. So let's say you need to search for PPS numbers. Your users have documents that have PPS numbers on them. We can, based on DLP, scan those documents and to make sure this kind of data exists on them. And then the other solution on which Azure Information Protection is based is Azure Rights Management Service. So once we find that data, we can protect it, either suggesting protection to the users. So if the user is working on a file that has sensitive data, Azure Information Protection is able to display a warning to them saying that this document should be protected with a given policy that was created by us. Or we can forcibly apply protection to it, skipping the whole user and user interaction with AIP to make sure we are able to provide the security the document needs.
Okay, thanks for that, Leonardo. And just a quick follow-up. You're saying that basically Azure Information Protection will protect the files no matter where they are, no matter where they go. And also, on top of that, they can protect files that we specify, so company sensitive files. So it has a double benefit, but can you tell me, without getting into too much technical detail, how is it that Azure Information Protection can basically follow the files and the data and ensure that it protects the data no matter where the data is?
Sure. The main difference between Azure Information Protection and the current protection of data we have today, that is basically file servers on files on file servers inside our premises, is that when you have documents on file servers, you are able to provide protection to them based on groups and permissions only as long as they stay within your file service. So if a user that has permissions to access the file copies that into a flash drive and then shares the flash drive with someone else, the person that receives the file will be able to open it. It's already the owner of the document. With Azure Information Protection, you protect the file wherever it goes. Uh, Basically, what it does is encrypts the file and uses a certificate to tell who is entitled to open that document, what kind of permission they have on the document, and the expiration of the document if we define one. So with that, we have a greater control of the data usage, no matter where it goes. So on that same scenario, if I protect a document with Azure Information Protection and share it with someone else, whenever that person tries to open it, the credentials to access that file will be required. And if the person doesn't have them, they won't be able to see the content. We can even track the usage or the attempts to have access to that file. So let's say you you share a document, a protected document, with a partner or a client that stays that resides here on Ireland. Uh, if you then receive a notification of an attempt to open the file on Russia or North Korea, you are likely to have a problem in your hands because you are not supposed to have that kind of attempt. You can then go ahead and revoke access to everyone on that file except for yourself. That was the file creator. This gives us a greater control on the file usage as well.
Okay, Leonardo, thanks for that. That was good detail there, and it's also reassuring to know that you do have the power to revoke access if necessary. The next topic we're going to discuss is data access. Who is allowed to access the data, the whole area of permissions and so on. And all this is talked about with Azure Active Directory Premium. And by the way, all these tools and softwares that Leonardo was talking about, at the end of this webinar, we're going to tell you where you can get all of them. But Leonardo, can you tell us a bit about what Azure Active Directory Premium can do for us?
Sure. Azure Active Directory is a service that allows authentication of users on Office 365 and Azure. It has several different versions, from free to basic and then premium versions. Azure Active Directory Premium uh, allows you a greater control on identity. So with it, you can, for instance, enable or create conditional access policies. So if you don't want your users to have access to your Office 365 or Azure resources outside of your work, outside of your offices, you can then create a policy for that. Uh, on the other hand, if you have users that rightfully need to access external Office 365 resources externally, you can then say that if a given user tries to access it externally, enable second factor authentication for those users. With it, you can have a greater control on the external access to make sure that only the person that uh, is able to access will have access to it. Another feature that Azure Active Directory Premium has is it's called risky sign-ins. What it does is it monitors publicly known sites where credentials are uploaded to when they are leaked, and some other deep web sites to make sure that your credentials doesn't show up on those sites. And in the case it does, then your access can be blocked at the same time, at least temporarily. So things can be sorted out. But it also prevents, even if your credentials end up being leaked, it might preventing external access from an attacker.
Okay, thank you again, Leonardo. And again, the theme seems to be that these security features put you in control of your data and who can access it, rather than leaving it in the hands of your users. But one of the other benefits there is that users can also reset their own passwords, so they do have that limited power. And of course, I'm sure a lot of attendees here are in companies that have rather pressurized service desks and stressed IT security people. So it will allow them to focus more on their job rather than running around after people, making sure that they set up their passwords correctly, because it will allow the users to do that. Moving on to the next slide, which is all about the area of mobile. We all know, if we look at our Google Analytics stats, that mobile usage has now surpassed desktop. In fact, that happened a few years ago, and it's only going up. So of course, it goes without saying that it's necessary to be aware of security issues with mobile. And now, Leonardo, you're going to discuss how Microsoft Intune helps in this regard.
When we talk about mobile devices, it's when we have the easiest way to identify the occurring of shadow IT, in a sense that it's so much easier for users to use unsanctioned applications to share data with other people externally or even internally. So let's say a user wants to share a large file with a partner or a client, and you as an IT, didn't provide the tools for it. It might they might end up as well using Dropbox or Box or WeTransfer, and you won't even know that that is happening. So and especially nowadays that each of those solutions have apps you can use on your mobile devices. It's as simple as a tap and share it. So Intune addresses these issues in a sense that it's possible to define mobile device and application management policies. So with mobile device management, we can set up policies to protect devices with different password types, aspirations. We can encrypt devices, and uh, we can also set on the mobile application management. We can say that uh, 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 your work profile will be separated from your personal profile. So for employees that use their own personal devices, uh, they will have isolation of data between corporate and personal. And with mobile application management, we can create policies that will not allow, for instance, data that was open on a OneDrive document to be copied and pasted on a personal application. Let's say a personal email account or WhatsApp, this kind of thing. We can also prevent screenshots from being taken. So let's say a user tried to copy the data and it was unable to, and then he might try to take a screenshot of the data he has. With Intune, that will not be possible as well.
Wow, that's great, Leonardo. And all that sounds very helpful. But if I were to put to you two real world scenarios, can you tell me how Intune would deal with these? Number one, someone at the company, their mobile device is stolen. We obviously want to remove all company sensitive data from that mobile device. And number two, an ex-employee at the company, he continues to use his phone. He has company sensitive data on his phone. But in this case, we don't want to wipe all the data. We don't want to remove his baby photos, for example. We only want to remove the company sensitive data. In both those scenarios, will Microsoft Intune do what we need it to do?
Definitely, with Intune, we can, depending on the who owns the device, if it's a corporate managed device, and it gets stolen, we can make a reset factory on it, so that way all data will be wiped out. On the other hand, if it's an employee that leaves the company but uses a personal device with corporate data, we are able to only remove corporate data on it, keeping the personal data intact.
Okay, that's great. And now we'll move on to the final section that we're going to discuss, which is the big one that we're hearing about in the media all the time and that people are worried about, especially with GDPR coming up very soon, data breaches, um, and also how we can detect these, how we can mitigate risk against these. And Leonardo, you're going to speak about ATA, advanced threat analytics, and how that can help us find out about these data breaches. Because as we saw earlier, a mistake being made quite often is that these aren't being found, or they're being found too late in the day. The average time was 191 days. Um, Advanced threat analytics, of course, will help to identify these much quicker. So, Leonardo, you can go ahead and speak about this area.
Sure, yeah. Advanced Threat Analytics, or ATA for short, uh, it's a solution that sits on your corporate Active Directory environment, and through machine learning and behavior analysis, creates a pattern of your Active Directory usage. So what it does is monitors which users access resources from which computers usually, which users uh, have uh, administrative permissions on your environment, and whenever an action that is unusual to that pattern, a warning is created. So let's say uh, a regular user queries your Active Directory for a large amount of user accounts. That could mean that someone has gained access to that computer and is trying to identify administrative accounts. So ATA will perceive that action, will create a warning and send a log or an email for you as an IT administrator to be aware of it. Uh, it also monitors unusual permissions being granted. So a common user that it's only a domain user, a regular account, is granted maybe domain admins and then enterprise admins, unusual permission granting. It also monitors for that kind of action and will let you know as soon as that happens. This all the intent of ATA is to proactively monitor your environment to make sure you are able to take actions before any actual breaches happen.
Okay, Leonardo, that sounds again very useful. But just to clarify, and we've had a question on the chat here, advanced threat analytics will help us to identify these potential data breaches or security issues, but even though it will trigger those warnings, it won't necessarily be proactive in taking action. We're going to have to act on the warnings that come our way. Is that correct?
Yeah, ATA does not take actions on the warnings it logs. It's a tool that will give you insight on what's happening on your environment. Uh, that being said, the main reason it doesn't take any actions by default is that it might be a false positive. So let's say you as an user is getting a list of all your users on Active Directory, maybe for HR purposes or something like that. That is a do action. We don't want to block your access while you are working on something that you should be doing. So that will ATA be will work as a support tool for IT to have an idea of what's going on your environment.
Okay, Leonardo, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks for answering that. Um, and now you're going to briefly run through where we can get all these security features. It's within EMS.
Yes, EMS, Enterprise Mobility Security Bundle, contains all of the features we have discussed today on two different plans, EMS E3 and EMS E5. EMS E5 is the most complete bundle and you will be able to deploy all of the features we have discussed today. Uh, EMS E3 might have all of the features, but on a lesser degree. But you'll still be able to do much of what we have discussed here.
Okay, thanks for that, Leonardo. And before we wrap up, I just want to quickly tell you that Microsoft recently launched a new bundle called Microsoft 365, and that contains EMS. So it also has Office 365 and Windows 10. So it might be something that your organization should consider investing in. As you can see there, it has Office 365, it has Windows 10, everything in Windows 10 Pro. And then it has all the features that Leonardo has been discussing within EMS. And it's also worth saying that if you do, obviously some organizations already have Office 365 and Windows 10. The licenses here are flexible, so you maybe you'd be paying a little bit extra to have the peace of mind and reassurances that EMS provides with regard to security issues. So that's why Microsoft 365 is fulfilling a lot of business needs out there, because there is a lot of concern about security issues with GDPR on the horizon. And it's all available within one nice admin console. So Microsoft 365 is certainly something that your business should consider. Now, just to close out things, if you are interested in using Microsoft 365 or want to see it in action, feel free to register your interest at the email address there on your screen, webinar@codec.ie. Ask us any questions and we'll be happy to answer them. And we'll even invite some of you, if you would like, to come out to Microsoft Place and see some of these security features in action. So all I can say is thank you for attending this webinar this morning. We wish you all the best, and all I can do now is say goodbye, and also goodbye from Leonardo. We hope you've gained some insights from the presentation, and just to remind you again of that email address, it is webinar@codec.ie. So thank you very much for attending this morning.